Welcome back to the Postpartum Plan podcast. This podcast is designed to support and empower you through postpartum. Whether you're expecting, in the early postpartum days, or beyond, this space is for you. I'm your host, Madison Fugere, a dedicated postpartum doula and pediatric sleep consultant, striving to help parents feel confident and supported in their parenting journey. Each week, I'm sharing practical tips and expert advice to help you navigate all the postpartum things with confidence. Well, as much confidence as you can. Let's embark on this journey together, making your parenthood as serene and supportive as possible. Bec is known throughout the Boston birth and yoga communities as a visionary in the prenatal field. Her studio and now online program, Om Births, has helped thousands of pregnant people prepare and transition into motherhood. Bec's also a certified meditation instructor and a prenatal yoga teacher for more than 25 years, as well as a pelvic floor yoga teacher, a birth doula with more than 300 births, and a childbirth educator in several styles, including hypnobirthing and spinning babies. Her work focuses on bringing balance to the body after and during pregnancy, but also finding the balance between mind, body, and life in times of transition and groundlessness. She is a mother to a 5-year-old son who is her most profound meditation teacher. I'm so excited. This is going to be such a good topic. Oh my gosh. Yep. Welcome. Obviously hyped to have you here today. And I think it's going to be so cool to kind of like talk meditation and just like mindfulness and all of the things that come along with it, especially in relation to pregnancy and postpartum and motherhood as a whole, because I'm sure it can be the most stressful but also rewarding things. So
absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on and giving me an opportunity to talk about a topic that is absolutely, I mean, it's obviously near and dear to my heart, but I always joke, this is the cocktail party topic that when someone asks me, I want to keep going, but I have to hold myself back. So I'm delighted to be able to really be able to dive in and talk turkey about some of this stuff.
Yes. Yeah, no, for sure. I think that there's going to be like so many aspects of this all that we can like pull into. And I know you have so much information, so I'm excited to dive in. Do you want to like, before we dive into like the whole nitty gritty of it, do you want to like tell us a little bit about you and like what brought you to all of this kind of realm of the world and you know,
sure,
the offerings kind of that you have for people? Yeah.
Sure. Kind of how did I land in this particular seat? So yeah, as you said, I've been doing this for 25 years now, which always blows my mind a little bit to think that it's been that long that I've been this. But I actually got into this field, ironically, because I started teaching yoga, not prenatal, just regular yoga.
Just regular yoga, yeah.
And my very first yoga class, I walked in, as I say, I was a shiny, excited new little yoga teacher.
Yes.
And I had 5 pregnant students in the class, and 3 of them were in the 3rd trimester, and I totally freaked out. Right. I had no idea what to do. I couldn't remember anything that they had taught us, and I probably gave them the worst yoga class of their lives. If anyone's listening and you are one of the 5 people, I apologize, because the whole thought process that I was going with through the whole class was don't hurt the baby. Oh, right. God, and breathe. And so after that, it really kind of got me curious about what is it about pregnancy, and then how does that influence the birth process? How does that influence the transition into parenthood and motherhood? And where does this go? And so I started taking all these trainings and pretty much got hooked and realized I had fallen into a very, very deep rabbit hole that I was going to say, it's very happy to keep spiraling.
I love it.
Completely. But it was this fascinating intersection of body movements combined with mental focus, combined with attitudes around how do we cope with, as you said, change? How do we cope with transition? And what is our connection to ourself, whatever that actually means, as we go through all of these shiftings? So there were all of these quote unquote spiritual practices and spiritual teachings that kept popping up as these sort of interesting places of, and that applies over here.
Yeah.
Not in the way this very male teacher has
Right.
presented it, because a lot of the spiritual teachings out there, they're often taught by male teachers. They're taught by male teachers who are often monks or ascetics. So they are removed from the sort of everyday activities of daily life that moms are tasked with on a regular daily basis. And so it became very interesting to look at some of these practices and say, well, what if you weren't in a nice monastery in the Himalayas with beautiful vistas and somebody else making your food and cleaning your room and doing all of this? What if you had to put this into what is technically called the householder path? What if we were family people and we had to cope with it in that intersection? And it just became such a fascinating topic that it's just been where I've just kept going.
That's so cool. And it's the realistic side of life. I never would have even thought of it that way. And like you started saying it, I was like so drawn in. I'm like, yes, that's exactly it, right? Like it's their realism of life. And I think that, like you said, it's such a transitional period. And I think that, prenatally and postpartum too, like both alike, are probably and debatably the first time in your life that you are not having to just think for you, right? Like, you're really just one individual and you have yourself to look out for. But when you're pregnant, you have to think about the little individual that's inside of you. And when you then have a baby, so many people are trying to do what's best for their kid, whether that be similar or different from their own upbringings, which I'm sure brings a whole nother level of stress and panic to it all, which I just think it's so cool. I mean, there's so many things that could be so anxiety provoking throughout this whole process. And I feel like just even when we were talking and like some of the topics we're getting into, but like just the reality of being able to bring some of these practices into daily life, right? Like it doesn't need to be like you're saying, this monk like thing of, okay, I'm going to go take 2 hours and go do yoga and meditate by myself in silence. It's like in the heat of the moment, how can I handle things? Like this can be a coping tool and it's a skill.
And it is a coping tool, and this is what a lot of the research has recently started to show with the whole programs around like mindfulness-based stress reduction and these different sort of codified ideas that now say, in fact, one mindful breath is enough to have an impact. That this can, in fact, shift the way that we're interacting with the people around us, that we're interacting with these ever-changing situations. I mean, that's one of the spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual principles that keeps coming back, is this idea of change and things upending. We talk about it from the point of view of, okay, when you were not pregnant, maybe you were only focused on taking care of yourself, and now you get pregnant and there's another theoretical self inside of you.
Yeah.
And then there's so many different places where we can look at, okay, having to deal with letting go of a construct of who we thought we were,
right?
Who you thought your baby was going to be, how you thought your birth was going to go, how you thought the postpartum period was going to unfold. I mean, it's this constant, it's almost like everything just keeps layering on top of each other, and you look and you say, I have to let go of this, and I have to let go of this other thing, and I have to let go of this other thing.
Right.
And it's one of the things that personally, it was one of the things that really drew me into the meditation practice for myself, was letting go, particularly in this current culture. It has this kind of both mythical idea of like, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it all go. Disney made a whole song about it or something. But then there's a very cold, very kind of feeling of loss associated with it. This sense of, I have to let that, you got to let that go. You've got to let go of yourself as a mom, which, we could get into there's a whole nother podcast episode about that one. But this idea of that letting go could actually be something that is lightening. Letting go is something that actually frees you to be able to experience the moment you're in, be it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Doesn't mean you don't let go and everything becomes sunshine, bunnies, and rainbows. It's
right.
We're letting go of ideas that we might have had about who we were or who we were going to be or who our mother was. We mentioned trying to let go of your own parenting and your own way that you were parented. Well, there's also a turning where you start shifting your relationship with your parents, and you maybe get a different perspective from the other side.
Yeah.
And for some, that can be extremely humbling. Sometimes that's extremely rewarding to look at it and say, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. And now how do I deal with this? Because I see how my parents dealt with it, and I want to do it in a more mindful kind of manner. I want to do this with more deliberate precision. But I'm also still carrying with me all the habits, all the baggage, all the neuroses that I learned when I was growing up. And I think sometimes we're very conscious of that, and sometimes we're not. And it's only almost after the fact that you look back and say, oh, darn it.
Right. And just even the way that you were just saying it, it made me think of, I mean, I don't want to call it a movement, but I think there's been a large uptick in, I mean, you see it all over social media of people using like that gentle parenting, parenting method, I think. And I think that's very much like a generational thing of people that are realizing childhood traumas of their own and just like different ways of parenting. And again, I don't want to call it a trend because I don't think it is, but I think that it's definitely a lot of people are trying hard to do that right now. But like in those moments, like you're saying, there are going to be big stressors, and finding ways to sit with the feelings that you're having of whether it be, like you said, great or horrible. Like if you're doing a parenting method that it's like gentle parenting in any way, you're often helping your child work through something and not just fixing it for them. So like you have to sit with uncomfortable feelings sometimes. So I can only imagine how useful like these types of practices could be for people that are going to go down that path,
Yeah. And it can be, I often say that whatever you haven't processed and whatever you thought you had processed through around your own childhood, get ready for it to come back as a parent, as you watch your child start to go through. And I would agree with you. It's not a trend, but there is a shift happening in parenting. And we should also acknowledge there was a shift in parenting with our parents. At that time, and there was a shift with their parents, and that there's always been a shift happening. Nothing is ever consistent with that.
Generationally, there's always change, which I think is great, but that just means we all have to get, used to what the new normal is, which I think is just life,
it means we're all learning from scratch on some level. And so we're all learning from our own direct experience, which really was the only thing that was ever there to begin with, was your own direct experience and how you respond to that. And thankfully, we're now realizing, I mean, some of these teachings are multiple thousands of years old, they say, but they're also very living, and they're here, and they're really about this moment, not 2,000 years ago when Buddha had the enlightened moment that he had. It was really about, okay, that's great, he had that, now what are you doing?
Exactly.
And how are you interacting with this stuff?
Exactly. I think that's, we could go into like a whole tangent on that one. Maybe that's episode like 3. I feel like we've already come up with multiple episode ideas now.
This will be a series or something.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I mean, even just so far, I can already tell it's gonna be one of my favorite episodes. So let's like dive into like what kind of services do you provide clients, and then like what does that like meditative thinking and processes for clients look like and for people look like,
Right. So, I mean, there's a combination. Obviously, the online program that I do, we have regular live stream classes. There's a recorded library, prenatal and postnatal focus. There's a pelvic floor focus. That's all the physical side of it. woven into the way that I teach is this kind of in the moment, present embodies experience of, okay, what are you feeling right now? How do you feel about it? What is the thought process around that? And then outside of the movement practice side, there is a weekly free mommy meditation group called Mommy Sangha. Sangha is a Tibetan and a Sanskrit word that means spiritual community. So it's basically
So cool.
a bunch of mom's circle, not the circle of crying moms. This is, we don't go through highs and lows of the week. I love it because it's an opportunity for people to practice. So we actually practice in that meeting. And then there's usually a reading, something from some kind of spiritual teachings or something that's kind of inspiring me that week. And then we have about 15 to 20 minutes of open discussion. And it really is open about what is going on for you? How are people interacting? And what I really love is because there is such wonderful support in this community for really working with the experience rather than trying to make it go away or solve the particular problem, that will kind of go beyond, oh, you know what you should tell your mother about the thing that's
right.
That, oh, I have this, I saw this thing on Instagram that was really helpful to me that did this. We don't go down that road. It's more, how are you feeling around this experience with your mother? Or what have you been finding is helpful to keep you grounded in those moments when you're feeling like, to pick a topic that tends to get fairly charged, when you're feeling like breastfeeding or chest feeding your child is going haywire and you're trying to solve this problem? What does it mean that you're solving that problem? What would that give you? What kind of feeling in your body comes up? And how do you actually engage with that experience, not the actual event that's trying to be fixed? So it's the idea of, as you said, there's been change in every single generation of parenting. Change is inevitable in parenting. Right. There's no way around it. And so rather than trying to make everything secure, done, check the box, I've solved the sleep problem, I've solved the breastfeeding problem, I've solved the particular whatever. It's more, how are you holding yourself in the middle of all that? Yeah. How are we working with that? And a lot of empathy around, oh my God, you dealt with, they said that? Right. That's totally unsupportive of you. I see you. I see that you're struggling. Just know that we're here to catch you. We're here to hold you. We're not going to solve it for you. We don't need to solve it for you. You have, it's the foundational principle of meditation. You have basic goodness inside of you. We all know instinctively what we actually need to be doing. I think that's one of the principles behind the gentle parenting idea is your child knows what it is that they need. They are a fully fledged human being, divine and enlightened in the moment they came into your arms. We don't have to improve on them, but we do need them to put their pants on. Right. So how do we navigate that? Exactly. How do we get to a place of remembering that we are good and they are good and we are having some struggle in this moment, and how do I work with that? Yeah. I mean, I think this honestly, it just sounds so needed. I mean, like, typically you have these struggles and you're looking for answers. And then, like, as a type A person, and like a lot of my clients are very much like me, like, we want answers, right? Like, you want check boxes, but that doesn't mean that like every time there needs to be, right? And I always make the joke that like in early prenatal days that like it's very much like an unhealthy relationship with your child because they're just taking and taking and taking, and you are sitting there like, well, what the heck do I do now? So to be able to come to a group where,
you express your struggles that you're feeling, but rather than just getting answers to the situation, you're getting an opportunity to, whether it be vent or, communicate and, get some personal support rather than a situational support is what it sounds like. And that's just so amazing. So amazing. I am literally, my brain already, Bec, is like thinking of all the clients that I'm sending your information to. And those who are listening to it now are going to be like, oh my gosh, Madison sent me this. She was thinking of me.
Send them
Yes, I was
on
thinking of
over.
you.
It's such a dynamic group. And we have, whenever I teach, whether it's meditation in the Mommy Sangha or if it's I teach it in the regular classes, or we have a larger version of the Mommy Sangha that I call it the full Mama membership, which is
I love it.
basically it's the idea of take in the fullness of this experience as it is and work with it rather than getting overwhelmed by the fullness. What if we actually worked with it and sort of helped each other find the ways to surf, to use a metaphor that's overused all the time.
No, I
From
love
that.
that though. Like,
And when
I
I'm
think,
when I'm teaching, often we'll talk about how like people have this idea, and I'm sure some of your listeners right now and some of the people hearing this are thinking meditation. Oh my God, I can't sit on a cushion. I
right.
can't. And that's why I say that's the monk in the monastery off somewhere. And it's great if you can manage to do that. Wonderful. And that's part of in Mommy Sangha, we take 10 minutes and it's guided. I'm not expecting anybody to just drop into meditation. There's instruction given. But we take 10 minutes and we sit. So you have that at least once a week where you did do the mental work of coming back. But the real practice, one of my first and favorite meditation teachers used to say, we don't meditate to become the like premier follower of the breath. If you're meditating just to be like super good and aware of your breathing, who cares? That's not going to help anything. We meditate to then be better people off the cushion. And so as parents, our practice really isn't about spending time on the cushion, though it's great if you can. It's really about how do you take that meditative practice and put it into your own life? Where can we bring our mindful awareness into interactions with our kids, interactions with our partners, interactions with the dishes, interactions with the laundry?
Yeah.
These ideas that, as I say it over and over in postnatal classes, if you're waiting for the world to calm down so you can have the time to meditate, you're going to be waiting a really long time. We've got to start now in the muck that we're in and see how it goes from there.
And honestly, that's why I think I was so excited to have you on. Like, if I had someone else reach out that was like, I want to talk about meditation, I'd be like, okay. But like, when you approached me with like the topic, and it wasn't just, we're talking about meditation, we're talking about how do we bring this into our lives? We're not putting our lives on hold to go be able to do yoga and to meditate. We're bringing this into our lives and utilizing those tools in order to help benefit and make your life better and more positive, and your parenting more enjoyable and happy. I think that's like so big.
And I would say even beyond, we're making it sort of, that's the hope, is that it'll be more happy, it'll be more joyful, and it will be. But the real thing is that when we meditate, and I think this is one somewhat different in the way that I teach meditation from the way some other people might conceive of it, we're not actually trying to get away from whatever it is that's going on. Because if you're trying to get away from it, then you're not present, you're not here. Your mind is perpetually either in the future, if I do this, then this good outcome will happen.
Yep.
Or you're in the past. If I had done that better, then things would be better right now. And both of those miss what is actually going on at this second. So in some ways, it's a process that we talk about, that meditating is the process of getting familiar with something. That in some ways, you're making friends with you.
Right.
You're making friends with your mind and your mental state And your neuroses, they don't go away just because you sat down on the meditation cushion. They're actually going to stick. They're going to stick with you pretty well till the end.
Right.
So you're getting to be friendly with them and be able to say, oh, well, there I go, being my mother again. There's that neurosis that I've picked up because of this experience that I had. And you may not be able to stop yourself from reacting, but you can at least see that you're doing it and be a little nicer to yourself about the fact that, okay, I just yelled again. I swore I wouldn't be the parent who yelled. Or with gentle parenting, I swore I wouldn't be the parent who put down those strict, hard boundaries that left my child in a timeout in their room. I swore I wouldn't do. I just did it. Okay, how can I be compassionate to me? And in the process of being compassionate to you, we automatically end up softening towards our kids, and we end up softening towards our partners, and we end up softening towards the people around us, which then might decrease that level of suffering we're all coping with. So it's sort of, I always caution people when they say, I'm going to meditate and things are going to get great. And I say, yeah, how's that going?
Right. You got to put the work in. It's takes some time and some consistency is what I'm understanding thus far.
Well, it takes some time and consistency, yes, but it also takes the willingness to stay with it. It's not that it has to be hard. It really is the consistent practice of coming back to it. And that doesn't mean, again, I can't say it enough times, it doesn't mean consistently sitting on the cushion necessarily. Right. It means consistently in those moments coming back to being here. And even if you come back and you realize you have now had mindfulness 5 minutes after the fact that you needed it. Okay. You had it 5 minutes after rather than 2 hours after, rather than 5 years after.
Right. Right. It's huge. So people are listening now and going, so how the heck do I do this? So what is this like? Like, walk us through maybe like an example that you've heard from people, or like how you suggest to people that you're working with to like start this. Obviously they can come join your classes and virtual stuff like that, but like if they were to just like 3 things or 2 things or whatever that they could walk away from this listening to, like what could they implement? What do you suggest?
Okay, so here's the first thing, and folks listening, you can do this right now. This is not something you need to do elsewhere. Take 1 second right now. Feel what your body feels like. Actually feel it. What position are you in? What physical shape is your body putting itself in? And I do not want anyone to close their eyes right now. In fact, I want you to keep them open. We actually, when we meditate, we in this style, we keep the eyes open. So when your eyes are open, look, what is in front of you? Really see it. What's the color? What's the shape? Are there any thoughts that are coming up around this thing you are seeing? Just for 1 moment. Don't feel you need to do anything about them. Just notice. The thoughts are a layer on top of what's really here. Just see it for a minute. And you could take this into any sense. So maybe right now, can you open up your ears? What's the sound? And if you can, could you actually not even label what the sound is, just hear it? You live your life in a postmodern symphony. When was the last time you heard it? And we can take that into your breathing, taste in your mouth, the smell in the air. And if you notice at any point that your mind is spiraling off, no problem. That's what the mind does. Just notice it. You might even congratulate yourself that you noticed it. because most of the time we don't see it. Ah, look at that. That'd be a thought. Huh. Okay. And then come back. Start over. What's in front of you? So, I mean, that's even a long practice for someone who wants to start. This really, and the way I actually suggest this for my new postpartum students, you have a perpetual reminder of present moment in the form, for those of you that can't see me, I just picked up the doll. I just picked up the baby doll. In the form of your child.
Yeah.
And so how many hours out of the day are you spending holding this kiddo? And what if 1 minute of that time, and 1 minute is a long time, let's be clear here, if you actually spent a full minute doing it, but what if for 1 minute you just really looked and you really felt for yourself and you felt your breathing and you listened to their sounds and you noticed your reactions. You didn't have to do anything about it. We're just familiarizing ourselves with what we do.
I think there's just such a huge realization in it. Like you said, you're holding your baby all the time. And while you're even doing that, and while you were talking, like my mind just takes me to like, I mean, my overnights, but even more so like clients at night, you're up multiple times a night and like, no, you may not want to be awake at 2 a.m. feeding, right? Like the first few days might be joyful and exciting, but that's a thing that's happening repetitively, for a while. You're up in the middle of the night, you're doing these things. That's not something that you want to be doing, or baby won't go back to sleep and it's been an hour, right? Like those are moments when we are so just over it, right? And not to discount that, because you have every right to feel frustrated and over it. Like that doesn't make you any less of a parent. But maybe in those moments, like babies are so good at reading your vibes. So like if you're frustrated, baby likely isn't going to calm down either. So doing like even just what you just said, right? Staring at baby and realizing what everything is going on, not like trying to fix it, but just like acknowledging it all.
Yep.
And especially at night, like in those moments, because people always use the phrase, it goes, what is it, days go by slow and nights go by slow, but the years go by fast, or whatever it is.
The days are long, the years are short.
That's the one. That's the one. I think that that's so true, and especially at nights. But you hear that and you're like, yeah, whatever. But I've heard so many people say, look back, and like, even just with clients of mine, I've been like, look back at the 3 months I've been with them. And I'm like, it feels like yesterday. Right. So being able to take those moments, especially in the middles of the night when you really have nothing else to do, either scroll your phone or watch a show or just sit there. Maybe one of those night feeds, you just sit there and you just try to absorb it all. Right. Like you said, just stare at that baby and remember, give yourself the opportunity to remember all of those moments. That's just so
or
incredible.
also or also acknowledge, because even as we're talking, we can sort of notice that we're all saying we're sort of, we favor making things feel better. We automatically favor it, that at 2 o'clock in the morning, if you stare at your baby, maybe things will start to feel better. And the additional part that I always add is, or they won't.
Right.
And then can you just acknowledge that your baby, you really want to be asleep right now. You really want your baby to go back to bed, and it's driving you crazy. And you can feel yourself spiraling.
Yeah.
And we are still basically fundamentally good, enlightened, fabulous people, even in that moment. That the meditation practice is not only going to make us into calm, zen, wonderful, enlightened human beings. It's the irony is the enlightened being is the one who really, really, really wants the baby to go to sleep.
Right.
At 2 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also something that I remember reading once about just brain function in the middle of the night for an adult brain, which is when you wake up at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning and you were in your own deep sleep cycle, the cognitive part of our brain, the forebrain, the logical processing, etc., is not on. It's really in a serious like sleep mode, like computers asleep thing. And so the only thing that's really functioning is your gorilla brain, your mammalian foundational, and that one has the amygdala in it, and that one will keep spiraling up all these thoughts. And that's why even before we were pregnant, people have woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning and had like absolute insomnia over something that once you finally fall asleep and wake up the next morning, you're like, why was I worried about that?
Right.
I don't need to be worried about that. But it's the part of your brain that would have said, you know, you don't need to worry about that. If you didn't send the email, it's okay. You can send it later. Nobody cares. That part is asleep at that moment. And so the little part, the part that I joke, it's a metaphorical 5-year-old. I'm not kidding when I say my son is my ultimate meditation instructor, because I can look at him and go, this would be foundational brain awareness,
right,
without the rules from society on top of it. And so we can have that awareness to say, you little mini me brain do not understand that this isn't that big of a deal.
Right.
That this moment, that this baby will not go to sleep, and suddenly your brain has concocted a story of how your child will never sleep. And then that your relative who's going to come over is going to give you a whole diatribe about the story of what you should have done with the sleep training and why didn't you do the sleep training, and maybe you should have followed that book a little bit better. And then you get into a whole picture about what is the story and the relationship with your relative, and how does that work out, and now suddenly you're down a serious rabbit hole.
Right.
That if you have practiced, I would be thinking, I feel really crappy right now. Okay. You really want to go to sleep, kiddo. I really want to go to sleep too. We both really want to go to sleep. You can't figure out how to go to sleep. Oh boy. I could show you, but then I'd drop you on the floor.
Right.
Okay. What's going on here? Ugh. It's hard. And acknowledging that challenge doesn't make it go away necessarily, but it does decrease our suffering additionally around the fact that it's difficult.
And it gives you that practice to, like we've both said, just because you can't get baby to fall asleep and that you don't know why they're awake or why they're frustrated doesn't make you any less of a mom, a person, better than your neighbor or worse than your neighbor. You know, you just have to start to learn to acknowledge it, because everyone is doing their best. And like, I think that's just a common theme as a whole, not just immediate postpartum conversation, but parenthood as a whole. I think that's so huge. Yeah. Now I know that you have written a book that's coming out.
Yes.
So I feel like I'm sure there's some of this information in there. Do you want to tell us like some of the stuff that's in there where people can get it, and like all the things that they're going to learn?
I would love to. Shameless self-promotion here.
I love it.
Yeah, so the book is called The Om Births Approach, and it's going to be coming out probably mid-September of this year, 2023. We're finalizing the publication dates right now. And yeah, it is a book focused on using your yoga practice fully for preparing your mind, body, and spirit, if you want to go there, for the birth process, for pregnancy, for birth, and for postpartum. And so there are snippets throughout it of meditation practices. When you get the book, if you get it, you will notice that there is always a URL above the description. So there are actually recordings that you can go put that in, and you can get a recording of me reading it. So you actually have somebody could guide you directly through the practice. It covers the basic instructions for basic mindfulness practice, There are instructions for how to work on dropping the storyline that your mind might spiral into.
Mm-hmm.
There's a practice around developing loving kindness and compassion. The appendix at the end has one of my favorite meditation practices, which is what I call your baby is a raisin. It's actually a practice I borrowed from another childbirth educator, Nancy Bardacke, who's developed the mindful birthing program. But it's the mindful raisin exercise is a common mindfulness practice of taking a raisin and then really, as we did sort of just a moment ago, engaging your senses, but really engaging your senses, looking at the raisin and seeing all the crenellations and folds and shininess, and then smelling it and noticing how your body is responding, and then putting it in your mouth, and eventually finally eating it and really tasting it, and then finally swallowing it. So with the baby, it's the same idea, and it's actually a practice specifically for times if you're holding your baby and you're finding yourself really getting worked up or frustrated about something, is to really look at them, and then to hear and to feel the kind of how's their body moving, what's their breathing, and maybe smell. And I left out taste because it'd be weird to lick your baby in a meditation practice. Oh, hey, if you want to, animals do it all the time. From that, but it's sort of really bringing it down into specific practices. So and cool. the idea with this book, it's the book I wish had been there when I first taught my first yoga class with 5 pregnant students in it, because had that book been out already, I wouldn't be a prenatal yoga teacher, because I would have had the thing to pick it up and look at. So it's speaking to people who would have a little bit of an understanding of a yoga practice. I don't go through quite all the basics, but then I really dive into how do the movements that we do in yoga influence your body for pregnancy? How does that influence your body for birth? And how does that influence in postpartum recovery? There's a whole chapter at the end about postpartum practices, physical, meditative, mental, breathing, pelvic floor, all included in there.
Amazing. So cool. So, I mean, literally, it sounds like literally anything that you could wish in a book, which is amazing. Now, I always ask this question. I know we kind of said that your answer to one of these might be the book, but if you could give a new parent one piece of advice and one product recommendation, what would you suggest or tell them? And I know products, like we said, they are tricky to tell because I think it really depends person to person, which is why I think everyone should just go get the book as their product. But what kind of advice would you give people?
So yeah, I mean, products become such a quagmire because the specifics of one person's experience might not be exactly the specifics of another person's experience. So I usually stay away from direct product recommendations. My main piece of advice for parents, though, is go get all the information you need. Go ahead and research your heart out. Talk to all the experts, but only you know your baby best. Only you know your family situation the best. And any advice, any books, any routines that you might start with, if they don't feel like they're working for you, let them go.
Right.
Drop them. If you talk to 5 different lactation consultants about what you should be doing for feeding your child, you're going to have 5 different opinions about what it is that you should be doing. Each one will probably have a kernel of truth in it, but the trappings beyond that may not speak to you. So take what works, throw the rest out. And the other thing, I guess this is the closest to a product that I ever have, get a doula. Get somebody, and for birth and postpartum, get somebody who can give you better support than we have in this transition. We're supposed to have the village. It's such a cliche. It takes a village to raise a child. What they really should say is it takes a village to support a mom.
Yeah.
And we don't have it. All the meditation practice in the world is not going to help you if you genuinely don't have anyone to turn to who can say, I'm here for you. I don't sell anything. I'm not, I don't report to the doctors. I don't report to anybody. I'm not responsible to a hospital. My only job is to make sure that you're supported and that you have the resources and you have the network that you need for you. Yes. And I wish that more baby registries would have a place where somebody could say money for doula and you could just throw cash in there. It's what I give when all
there. We're getting there. It's slow, but it reminds me similarly of like wedding type stuff, like way back, everyone makes a wedding registry, and older generations are like, oh no, I buy someone a plate set, or I buy them dishes, or I buy them KitchenAid. I don't know what you buy them, but like it's a lot more nowadays of saying like, here's money towards my honeymoon, here, add money towards my trips, or here, pay for an excursion for us or a dinner or something, and it's so similar. I mean, all of these episodes I feel like that I've done have had some sort of, services not stuff type of like thing that I want to plaster it everywhere. Because
it's a bumper sticker that we need.
Oh my gosh, it really should be. And it's so true, because you will get the things that you need, and you don't need all the things really. Society makes us think we need so many things, but you really don't need a lot. You need people, you need support, you need love.
Yeah. And there are as problematic as social media is, there are a million parenting, buy nothing, etc. groups out there that if you need more baby blankets, I guarantee you there is a family trying to get rid of the thousands of baby blankets.
Especially clothes. That they have. Babies don't wear clothes for very long that like, oh my gosh. And then everybody's like, this looks brand new. I don't want to just like throw it away. So everyone's trying to donate stuff all the time. It's so
everybody is wanting to give everything. And I think it's something that we could really lean into as new parents and as a society, is just to simply make it a regular thing that you are finished with your 3-month baby clothing. Here is a giant pile of baby clothes, minus maybe the 2 or 3 that you just got really attached to. And you must keep them as a memory and a keepsake kind of thing. Sure. But I remember when my son outgrew his Xer saucer giant circle of thing, that thing was taking up a giant amount of space in our living room. And I found somebody who had a new baby, 5-month-old, needed something because she had 2 other kids.
Right.
And I was more than happy to put it in my car and drive it over to her house to give it. That's the part, I mean, that's the sort of the loving kindness, the generosity that we have inherent in ourselves. It's always there. And
especially if we can lean into that,
especially for new parents. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
We all know, how hard it is once you've become a parent. So you understand people's struggles, and people are so much more giving to one another, I find, once they have gone through that. So
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate everything. If people are interested in information, I'm going to put some of your information in the show notes below. So head over, follow Bec, join one of our classes, have a blast. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Postpartum Plan podcast. I hope that today's episode brought you support, relatability, and valuable insight. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review and share with any of your prenatal and postpartum friends and family. Your feedback helps us reach more parents seeking support. And if you're looking for additional resources, please feel free to connect via Instagram at Serene Moments Doula for constant information, tips, and tricks, or check out my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com. See you next week.